Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about MOASH. Fuck MOASH. Alright, so I am firmly a part of the fuck MOASH camp, but today I want to kind of talk about him a little bit. Is MOASH redeemable? No. So I just want to kind of explain why I think MOASH is not redeemable and talk a little bit about the reasons why I think some people do believe he is still, even at this point, and this point being after Rhythm of War, before the Knights of Wind and something or another comes out. So this is long before the fifth book comes out, at least a year or so. So we don't have any like special information apart from the prologue. We don't have any information that would lead me to change my opinion on MOASH at this point. So these are my current opinions about MOASH right now. So yeah, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, MOASH. Alright, first of all, let me know in the comments down below, where do you fall? Are you a part of the fuck MOASH camp, or are you a part of the he's redeemable, or part of it's not his fault camp? Let me know about that in the comments down below. Let's talk about it. We can kind of argue about it if everyone takes it, not hyper seriously, because it's a fictional book character. So yeah, all right. So I want to kind of immediately start talking about MOASH and who he was early on in the story. So in Way of Kings, MOASH was kind of an antagonist to Kaladin. He was the only one when Kaladin reached his point of changing the way he was thinking about his situation and decided to kind of change the minds of everyone else and stuff and kind of almost embrace this terrible scenario he was in. MOASH was one of the immediate antagonists to him. Even as Kaladin started to wear down the other guys and kind of get them to join in practice and stuff like that, started to earn a little bit of respect for them and stuff like that, MOASH was kind of holding on to his resentment. And as a result of that, Kaladin kind of respected him more. So he kind of saw, okay, you actually push back against me. It kind of works as a sign to Kaladin that he's more independent in his thinking and stuff like that. He's, of course, not just going to follow people. So it leads him to respect him a lot more. So I really like that kind of beginning of the relationship and how it like kind of goes through. And I think as a result of where they started, by the time Kaladin started showing his Night Radiance powers and stuff, and really does start to, the rest of the crew start to see tangible changes as a result of the stuff Kaladin has done, then MOASH almost kind of develops this vague hero worship of him. It's like a secret hero worship that he basically processes as this like brother level bond. Like he grew a major attachment to Kaladin. Some people in the fandom think it's a full blown crush. I don't really see that, but I do definitely see that it is a complete and total attachment because MOASH has a lot of issues tied around the fact that he doesn't have any family left. So when Kaladin basically passed these mild tests he was kind of creating for him in the beginning, he kind of imprinted on him. So he, at least this is the way I see it, he imprinted on him as family. So Kaladin was going to be his North Star. So after Way of Kings, when we started to kind of get integrated into the rest of the army and they kind of get socialized out more and stuff, then we started to see the difference. MOASH is susceptible to other people's plans. He is very manipulatable. He can be convinced of things. He has one thing in his life that he's incredibly stubborn about, but most everything else he is quite malleable with, it appears. So when he starts to speak to the people that he has no ideas from the diagram, they kind of start to they take his own resentment and his own hatred that he already had towards Light Eyes and towards the king, and they just kind of use it for their own ends because they have no actual interest in MOASH. They just see him as an access point to get to Elhokar. So that to me signifies that MOASH was very manipulatable. He was very much susceptible to these people just playing with him to get what they needed from it. And it kind of shows towards the end after the failed assassination attempt when they kind of just take off and they all just have to run. They just kind of go. The only person that kind of sticks with him is Mraize. But almost immediately, all of his new allies are killed after the failed assassination attempt. The Parshendi, the listeners, pop up and they basically kill all of them. But because he has gotten used to Kaladin and has been around Kaladin during training and stuff like that, when he's training his Upsurges, MOASH has a vague idea of how to deal with somebody who can fly. So when the Heavenly One comes to kill all of the diagram people, he's able to actually hold his own a little bit and actually is able to kill one of the Heavenly Ones. And as a result, he gains the respect of Leshwi, who basically takes him on and like invites him to join, um, basically to join them essentially. So he becomes one of the workers in Kolinar after they take it over and stuff. And this again is another situation where Moash's allegiances are kind of fleeting. Yes, his new allies are dead, so there's really no actual option that he has. But the flip he makes mentally happens so quickly and with so little effort that I think it's another sign that he's just incredibly malleable. But he has this solid core that remains the core, and it kind of has grown a little bit beyond Kaladin at this point. It's more Bridge 4. He feels shame that what he did in betraying Bridge 4. He feels shame because that was his family. He started to imprint on Bridge 4 itself, the entire group of people as a family. So now he kind of feels like his loneliness is partially his own fault. He's actually on a path at this point, and I think like the beginning of Oathbringer, to that would possibly lead him to some sort of redemption. He starts to feel responsible for these things. But then when he gets more in the presence of the people under the influence of odium, because he's so malleable and convincible, they basically explain to him it's not your fault kind of thing. Like, it is just the nature of who you are. And he kind of takes that, I think, off of one prompting, if I'm remembering correct, and then kind of just internalizes that so completely that he completely like say it's not my fault. I can't be held responsible. I betrayed my brothers and like betrayed Bridge 4 and stuff and just did terrible things, but it's not my fault. I can't help it. I'm just a weak human. Like, it's just, it is what it is, like, kind of thing. So at this point where he stops taking responsibility and kind of tries to alleviate the shame that he feels, that's when he starts to make this shift, specifically for me. He starts to completely shift over. Like, it's not my fault, until eventually he completely accepts Odium's gift. When Odium absorbs all of his emotions, he can act his worst and never feel any sort of remorse or guilt or anything about it. So by the time we get to Oathbringer, when Kolinar is falling and he actually kills Elhokar, this is the point at which he is under the influence of Odium, which allowed him to do that action, but he is still enough of himself that we see later that he still questions it. It's still kind of in his head a little bit about what he did was wrong. He doesn't really think too much about Elhokar. It's more about the idea of not being with Bridge 4 anymore. And there's points in Rhythm of War. I think there's a point in Oathbringer too, but I can't be sure. I'm not sure. But I know in Rhythm of War they show points where he doesn't have Odium's influence, and he immediately feels the shame and the regret and stuff, and he kind of crawls back to the influence. He's begging for Odium to take that away. When that shift is made, that is, to me, when he becomes irredeemable. When he is no longer being the manipulated, the coerced, the led down this path by the nose kind of character. When he makes that switch to actively not blaming himself, taking no responsibility, then chalking it up to just being a human, saying it can't be helped, and then when he's actively clawing for Odium's influence, that's when he's basically made a shift. Not entirely irredeemable at that point, but that is not the road of redemption that he's basically going down. And then later, with this, most of this happens in between books, I think. In between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. This is where the true shift happens, in my opinion. When he goes from just taking orders and taking suggestions from Odium's people, that he's just, at that point, he's still malleable and manipulatable. But when he starts to participate, when he gives Odium the idea of how to take Kaladin, like, when he reaches the point of either Kaladin will join us and be just like me, or he has to die, and the only way to die is for him to kill himself, that is the culmination, it feels like, of his hero worship, his looking up to Kaladin as this fixture point, as this immovable object, this force that will always be there because he says no one can kill him, he can only kill himself, like, or he can be pushed so far into his depression that he will just like seek the easier path like I did. So when he gets to the point of speaking to Odium, having these visions, talking to Odium, and then giving Odium ideas on what to do, specifically in the Kaladin situation, that to me is when he becomes irredeemable. because he is no longer being manipulated. He is no longer being coerced. Even if he is under Odium's influence, we see later when the influence is taken away, there is no change. He is only scrambling to get back to the place of not feeling it. So it's even more not taking responsibility for what you did. So apart from just that, which I think is the core nature of to why he becomes irredeemable for me, it's then when you try to you have this relationship that has been built up. I've already explained the basis of the relationship. Kaladin also had greater respect for MOASH because he didn't fall into line. So Kaladin has at least as strong a connection to MOASH as MOASH has to him. Similarly imprinted with the loss of a brother and kind of a surrogate replacement kind of thing. And then this kind of taking on responsibility thing that Kaladin does, it definitely translates to wanting to keep each and every individual Bridge 4 alive, safe, and happy and stuff. So this hits him in this level of depression, and it makes this feel like a particular level of failure that it's very, very hard for Kaladin to deal with because of this level of attachment. Like it's said in Rhythm of War that like between books, he like told MOASH things he never told anyone about. He told him about all the stuff, like all of his, basically everything we know about Kaladin from reading his POV and seeing his flashbacks and stuff. MOASH knows all of that. So it is literally being trying, like the closest person to you that's left alive is the one pushing you further into the worst despair you've ever known and actively trying to get you to take your own life. That is so egregious to me that regardless of everything else, even though I think I've laid out a pretty logical path to say why he's irredeemable, I think that action in and of itself makes him completely and utterly irredeemable. And then on top of that, later on, he kills Teft, which is like, I can kind of accept that because Teft was at the end of his arc. Teft, it made sense for him to die because his entire arc was complete. Even though he was a great character, I love him, he was very fun to have around and stuff, great banter and stuff, but it's acceptable where his story ends. And it's even honestly acceptable to me that MOASH kills him. The thing that I have a bigger problem with is that he kills Fendorana. He kind of knows what it is, knows what he's doing. He doesn't really. He's also still just taking orders. But that action to me is just specifically egregious. Like, it's not as plot shattering. I mean, actually, it's incredibly plot shattering, but it's not like world shaking as just what he did with Kaladin. Actually, it is. I mean, I'm trying to downplay it because there's less of a harsh emotional connection between the characters, but ultimately I can't because this motherfucker killed a piece of God. Like, you guys have a provable God. Like, he killed it. Like, it's, and then, like, it's just, yeah. There's just, for me, Spren are of such an ethereal level of creature that it's like, it makes sense that there's people on Roshar that outright worships them. If anything on Roshar deserves actual worship, it's probably the literal ethereal creatures. So, yeah. So, just, yeah, it's just egregious. Everything he's done is just terrible. So, yeah, at this point, I think Brandon's real only option with the character of MOASH, even though Rhythm of War ends in such a way that, depending on how long Brandon wants to play with MOASH as a character, he can redirect him back onto a path that leads to redemption. Right now, he seems to be like, he has like divine blindness almost. Like he's blind because of the exposure to the spiritual realm. Odium is no longer the Odium that he was, so that influence is gone. I don't know if that was any sort of contract thing that Terra of Odium would have to keep going. I don't know if any of that, like Odium could honestly just leave him. Like completely sans influence, completely blinded, and just go off and good luck / no luck to you, you jackass. Like it could just be like that kind of thing. Or Brandon could be setting him up to be able to like help. Well, we got 10 days. Like the first of the final 10 days, that's not enough time. That's just not enough time. So unless MOASH's arc goes past part 1, goes to the back 5, and he has to basically become a hermit kind of situation and just go through and doing all kinds of useful deeds and stuff, probably somehow help take down Terravodium in some sort of way. Like, he would have to do something so massive, so good, so selfless, and so altruistic to be redeemed. The only real way I think at this point for him to get any kind of redemption, it'll have to be a death sacrifice situation. That'll be the only way. Otherwise, I think the best way to do it would have been to kill him in Rhythm of War, probably instead of the pursuer thing. They should have had MOASH basically be the pursuer, because it was hard to become really attached to the pursuer because he was a brand new character. But the level of history we have with MOASH, it could have been perfect if Kaladin and him had a final fight. And like at the time, I mean, I don't know. You could have lined it up with other stuff, like when Odium dies. That's like the final little last end of the battle, and he loses the influence, but Kaladin doesn't let up and ends up killing him or something. And but I think if he would have died in Rhythm of War, he could have died as a lesson about taking the easy way out and following Odium's path. But now that we have a new Odium, I have no idea what direction Brandon can take him. He can literally go and be just a hermit and just kind of go off and die anonymously at this point, or he could come right back around and become something redeemable or some sort of neutral party that's never redeemed, but we don't have to outright kill, and we can kind of like what Zeth is becoming, even though Zeth looks like he's on a hero redemption arc situation. We'll find out in book 5. Yeah. Or he has him become a pawn to Terravodium and then gets used and abused so much by Terravodium that it becomes like a sympathy redemption kind of thing, which I don't really want because that's also a kind of a cop-out. I don't really know how Brandon will go about it if he does choose to try to redeem him, but the way this story is set up, I fear that he will put him on some sort of redemption path because we can't directly lay blame or have him confront Odium in order to have a complete arc himself. Because at this point, his arc is incomplete. So I assume it either goes to the back half and it goes all the way to the culmination of Kaladin's story, or only to book 5 and also culminates with Kaladin's story, even though Kaladin's going to Shinovar, and I don't know if he knows that. So I don't know what the hell MOASH is going to be doing in this next book, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess. So yeah, I've rambled on long enough. Let me know in the comments down below. How do you all feel about MOASH? Do you think Brandon's going to put him on the path of redemption with this change of Odiums and stuff and with his break off the influence? Or do you think what he's done already leads him to just having to be killed off, having zero redemption of any sort? Do you agree with me that he should have died in Rhythm of War to satisfy this this look what happens if you accept Odium kind of arc? Let me know about it in the comments down below. Let me know all your MOASH thoughts. And as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to you all later. Peace.